Uh, Hello, everyone, and welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the talk earlier. And now we have Wendy Fu, who's an occupational therapist from the Royal Manchester Children's Hospital, and she's going to talk to us about CMT and how occupational therapy can help. Welcome, Wendy. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Simon. Should I just start my slides now, or?
Yes, if you're happy to, and we can take questions at the end.
Perfect. Thank you, Simon, and very good afternoon to everyone here who's listening. So I work with Melda, that you've all heard in the first talk, and today the aim is to talk a little bit about occupational therapy and what we can offer for children and young people with CMT. So I'm just going to share my slides. So just please bear with me for that. Can you see this, Simon?
Yes, yeah, thank you.
Perfect. So I've actually just had a look at the attendees and I've spotted some of our family. So hello to you if you're listening from Manchester. So if you look at the screen, I've actually changed the title of my talk. So initially it was Everyday Life with CMT, How OT Can Help. But I've changed the title because I think it better reflects what OT can offer. I'm aware that some of you here know a lot about occupational therapy already, in which case I hope you bear with me. But I'm just aware that as a profession, not everyone maybe understands what occupational therapy is, perhaps to the depth that what we can offer. Just this week, I was speaking to a parent and they were saying that their child had been given a diagnosis by the neurologist, and then a little while later they saw physio, they were given some stretchers, and then they were given some splints to wear. And then she said, and I've just now been left. I don't know what to do. I have to sort of live day to day with my child with their struggles, and where do I go next? I feel like nothing extra has been offered to me. And I thought, gosh, we need to be better at explaining what the occupational therapy offer is. And really, it's about unlocking the potential of children and young people with CMT. So I've got one of my favorite definitions of, let me just do this. Yeah, so I've got one of my favorite definitions of what occupational therapy is, and it's to do with the whole term of unlocking. So I'll just read this out to you because I'm aware not everyone can see it as clearly if you're using a phone. So it says, when people ask me what OT is and what we do, I tell them this. Picture a wall in front of you, as far to the left, as far to the right, and as far high as you can see. In that wall, there is a door, and that door is locked. On the other side of that door is what makes your heart happy. So playing with your kids, sewing, taking your dog for a walk, taking care of yourself without any help. It could be anything that makes a bad day not so bad anymore. So that's your occupation. Some people are born lucky and have their key and can walk through the door their whole life without a problem. Other people have lost their key or never had it to begin with. So it's my job to get them through that door. And if we can't, we bust a hole and make a new one. And I think that's a really nice summary of what the potential of OT is. And I think a lot of people presume that OTs come in and we offer a bit of equipment, for example, but there is a whole lot more to that. So I'm going to move on to possibly the most wordy slide I've got on here, and that's defining occupations. So in occupational therapy, occupation isn't maybe just a job that some people understand, but it refers to any activity in which a person is engaged. So we refer to everyday activities that people do as individuals and families and with their communities to occupy time and bring meaning and purpose to life. Occupations include things that people need to, want to, and are expected to do. And I think, in the last year with COVID, the world has woken up to the importance of occupations and the understanding of how the way we engage with our occupations is actually really therapeutic and fundamental to health and well-being. As SOTs as well, we also really understand that the key for childhood development is also the ability to participate in everyday childhood occupations, and that's for any child. So, a child with any without any medical diagnosis. But yeah, even more so with children with CMT or children with a disability. The things that we do in our lives that impacts on how we feel, and how we feel impacts on how we feel in our bodies often, and how we feel in our bodies impacts on how we perform in our occupations. So that's the link that I want to explain, and I feel that as occupational therapists we do understand this quite well. So children's occupations, as you all know with your children that you have, in occupational therapy we like to kind of categorize it into 3 bits. So the first one is self-care. So getting dressed in the morning, using the toilet, washing yourselves, cleaning teeth, preparing or helping out or eating meals. We talk about productivity, which for children, that's often schools, or going to school, or volunteering, or helping to care for others. And we know that there are young carers out there as well, so young people can also be caring for others. We also talk about leisure, so play, sports, shopping, Xbox, TV. And these are the 3 sort of categories of children's occupations that we look into. And if your child's CMT, or young person, or even yourself as an adult with CMT, if that gets in the way of doing any of these things on the screen, then that's where I feel that, that's time to seek advice from an OT. So I put this slide up to kind of show you a little bit about what your OT is thinking, and what they're, the kind of assessments that they might do when you first see an OT. And the aim is really to help people with maximizing your occupational performance, which is a really technical term for saying just, how well and how happy you're able to participate in the things that are important to you. And we know that occupational performance is influenced by how well the fit is between the person, the occupations that you need to do, and your environment. And that fit, throughout life changes, which I'll show in the next slide. And if the fit is not right, then your occupational performance is going to be impacted. So, for example, regardless of perhaps how the severity of impairments that you have, perhaps physically or cognitively, if the environment is not the right fit, we know that that performance is going to be impacted. And we know that that kind of changes throughout life. So if you look at that diagram in the middle, I know it looks a bit strange, a bit like a sausage. And if you look at, it's a bit of like looking at throughout life, like what's the fit between the person, environment, and occupation. So if we look at the left bit where you can see the 3 fits, and it looks like there's quite a lot of overlap between the person, environment, and occupation. So that's perhaps, for example, a young child, perhaps they don't have many symptoms, family, they've got lots of family support. And as a young child, the demands on your occupations are not very high. So in general, there's a good fit and they're thriving, perhaps when they're 2 or 3. And then you can see in the middle cross section over there, the 3 circles, where there's a slightly poorer fit and it overlaps a lot less. And that's perhaps, things like having a new sibling, things like starting high school, for example, or puberty. We know that, with puberty brings physical changes, children growing and their feet getting tighter. So, the person aspects change. The environment, when you start high school, you might have a new set of friends. It's quite a stressful time. And the occupations in high school, all the demands of that, all impact. It makes that fit a lot harder. And then that's when you can see the performances being impacted. So these are just some examples of things that, in life that happens, and it impacts on a person's performance. And it can also impact on their CMT. But sometimes, it's not just the CMT, it's actually a lot of things that are happening in life. And so as occupational therapists, we're very good at looking at the link between these factors and suggesting ideas. I put this up and I've actually stolen this from the internet. If you know who's created this, please tell me so I can give them the proper acknowledgement. Yes, so I've put this up. It's the CMT iceberg, and I really like it because I know that many of you here with CMT will know that it's the challenge of living with an invisible illness like CMT. So what others see, is a child who's on their feet, they're smiling, they're going to school like everyone else, they're walking their dog, they're exercising, they look like any other normal child. But what people don't see, what friends, what teachers don't see, what other family, extended family might not see is, the impact of pain, impact on fatigue, the impact on emotions, coping with an invisible condition that your friends don't understand. People don't see that, the physical changes, the weakness in your hands, the fallout, and also, the fear sometimes of, just making sure you don't fall over. All these things are invisible. And there's so much of that added cognitive and mental burden that people experience when they're managing their CMT. So I hope you like this. And please tell me if you know who created it or if it was actually you. So what OT aims to, the general principles of OT management for CMT, I would say early intervention is a big one. So often people may not seek advice from an OT until much later. So, perhaps a child has been diagnosed quite young, they're not got a lot of symptoms, they're not very different to their peers. And so they may be getting reviews in the clinics, they're seeing physio. But actually early intervention is really important. We know that increasing awareness and understanding from just families understanding what the condition is. We know teachers having a good understanding of the condition. That's so important in putting in accommodations that can just help the child to thrive early on so they don't start struggling. When the child has struggled for a long time, it really impacts them mentally and emotionally. So I think sometimes early intervention is also about realizing that if a child is not able to do something that perhaps their siblings have been doing at that age, it's looking and seeking OT advice early on. So for example, I've met children who are in year 4 and year 5 and they've never been able to cut up food on their own, and mom still showers, they're still getting help to shower. And that may be okay because it's okay, you've got time to do that for the child, but actually I think the child is missing out by not having early intervention to have the opportunity to develop the independence in all these things at the age that their friends and their siblings and everyone else is experiencing. So the other principles are around maintaining function and age-appropriate independence. One of the things that OTs look a lot into is activity analysis. So for example, if you come to us and say, I'm having difficulties putting my sock on, we work with you to kind of talk about, so how are you putting your socks on at the moment? Which aspects of putting socks on is it difficult? Where are you doing it? Are you sitting down? Are you standing up? Are you sitting on the stairs? What kind of socks are you using? Which bit is it? Is it the bit where you put over the toes, or is it the pulling up? So really looking at the activity and breaking it down and looking at which bit is difficult for you. As OTs, we also work very closely with our physiotherapy colleagues. We really want to make sure that children's postures are managed and that we keep, we promote the importance of maintaining good posture throughout. We know that having good posture is really important for doing things and function. And we know that as children grow, their spine, that's all really important to make sure that they're, I'm sitting up as I'm talking about this. But managing posture is so important. So thinking about maybe seating options in school and also at home. As OTs, we spend a lot of time talking about conserving energy and managing fatigue, and we'll talk a little bit more about that later on. We often talk to you about optimizing hand function because we know the CMT affects the little muscles in the hands, and that affects, that can cause some pain. It can affect joint alignment, grip strength, and also kind of hand movements as well. Obviously, OTs look into environmental adaptations, so things, equipment in the home, for example, that goes in line with keeping you safe, so reducing your risk of falls. We know that children with CMT are more prone to falling compared to their peers, and even if they don't fall, it's that that fear of keeping themselves upright, that, we want to think of all the strategies we can do to keep you safe, so you don't have that mental burden. Also, it reduces any risk of additional fractures, for example. OTs, we want to ensure that children get access to leisure and hobbies the same as any other child, the same as their siblings, the same as their friends. So, perhaps a lot of times there is uncertainty about, should I get my child involved in this or that? I'm not sure if they can. Always assume that they can, and seek OT advice so we can talk with you and problem solve how we're going to do that activity. A huge part of my role and community OTs is making sure children get the right support in school. That's such a big part of their life, their waking life. And finally, I want to talk about supporting parents and carers as well. So we are here for you as parents and carers to talk you through how to support your child. And I'm aware that some of you parents also have CMT yourself. So it's about talking to the OT, talking to your therapy team and saying, I'm having difficulties, putting the splints on for my child, for example. And, is there a way that we can make the straps easier? Because if you're struggling with your own hand function, putting your child's splints on is going to be a challenge as well. And there are also ideas that we can talk through that can help you to do these things. So I'm just going to run through the next slides. I'm just going to bombard you with lots of photos of ideas and things that OTs might suggest to you. If we were doing this face-to-face, hopefully I would have brought a big box and done a bit of a show and tell. But we can't do that, so I'll just bore you with some pictures. So some examples that an OT might discuss with you to help your child with promoting independence in self-care. So for example, the top left, you might not see it very well, but that's the adaptive uniform range. So from M&S and Asta, they're doing these uniforms where instead of having to do buttons, you can have Velcro behind, but at the front it looks just like a buttoned up uniform, and that's helpful for some children. The next one on the right to that sort of flip top bottles. It's just something that perhaps doesn't spill as easily. If you have difficulties with opening bottles, screwing things, that might be an easier way to promote hydration and also independence. The next one to the right is shoes with toggle laces. So these are often easier to manage with hand weakness as opposed to actually tying laces. Obviously, if your child is able to do laces and is happy to continue doing that, that's great. But they might also want to explore. There are alternatives to help them be more independent at their age. The equipment on the right looks a bit strange. It's called a button hook. And if you can see on the left, you can see it's a device to help you do buttoning easily if you struggle with buttons. I don't know any children who do use this equipment. It's a bit fiddly. It takes a bit of practice. But maybe if you're a parent who struggles with putting on buttons yourself and you're helping your child with buttons, you might want to use it to help your child with their buttons. Maybe it's probably more relevant for maybe adults and older teenagers who've left home. The one next to it is laces. So there are options of elastic laces, which look just like normal laces, and it converts like a trainer into a slip-on shoe. So that it eliminates the need to tie laces. That just the extra thing, just one small thing to eliminate. Obviously, if you wear trainers, you like them tight, you probably want to go for the toggle option. The one below that again is an example of maybe just putting a keyring onto a zip for younger children who struggle with zips, and it just looks like part of the clothing. To be honest, I don't think it looks out of place on there. The next one is cutlery. So sometimes if children are struggling with cutlery, we might recommend them to purchase some adapted cutlery, or just any cutlery that you can find that are slightly thicker and chunkier and easier. This range of adaptive cutlery, they're often quite good because they help to promote the sort of the hand positioning and where the children put their fingers and position, helps them learn that sort of movement and how to cut up food. And the next one on the right is just some normal socks that I've put on. I often say that if children find socks difficult, just start with some bigger, looser socks initially so that they practice with that, and it's easier to put on. And also, if you have a full top socks, it means that children can put their fingers into the folded bit and pull it up rather than having to pinch, which we know in CMT the pinch action is harder. So, or you can just fold down your normal socks. That's just called the sock trick that I sometimes share with people. Some more ideas for equipment to help with productivity and education. So we know that handwriting is often a struggle. We know that children with CMT often, find that writing huge amounts is a struggle, even if they have beautiful legibility. We know that some people struggle with writing with legibility, but actually even those who can write beautifully can really struggle with huge amounts. And we know that there is research that shows that the amount that children can write is a lot less compared to their peers, and that means that if they're spending so much energy on writing, it then impacts on the rest of their day and impacts on their ability to maybe put the thoughts that they have in their head onto paper. So some people use, for example, a sloped writing board. Not many people use it, but some people do, and it can help as well sometimes with promoting posture. You're not crouched over, trying to write and gripping your pen really hard. Some people find pen grips helpful, and there are lots and lots of grips online that you can try and find the one that suits you best. A lot of schools have these anyway for young children to practice with. Got an example on the right. Might look a bit strange. It looks it's just like a trolley that you can use, and some children say that in high school, if they're doing things like food tech, they struggle with carrying something across distances, especially if it's hot or it's heavy. So it's just, it's ideas and adaptations. We can help children to be more independent in things that they do at school, like a trolley. The one under the trolley is like a silicone jar opener. And there are so many different permutations of these on the market. So I don't want to recommend any brand, but these are just things that help with opening jars, bottles, things in science labs, makes it easier. I mean, I personally struggle to open bottles that have never been opened before, but if it's something that's been opened before, that's, that makes it so much easier. It saves your hands. The one on the left to that, if you can see the little green device, it's called a silicone cutter, and if you just Google that, you'll hopefully be able to find it. It's just something that helps some children. They find opening things difficult, so crisp packets or sometimes even like things in hard plastic packaging, yogurt tops, things like that. And instead of having to fumble through your bag looking for some scissors, these things, you can put it on a key ring, and it's just a tiny thing with a silicone blade. It's safe for safe for children's fingers, and it just slides over. It just cuts things through, and it just makes things a lot easier. The one on the left, which you may or may not have seen before, is called the spike board. So again, if a child is doing food tech, this chopping board has got spikes that help to stabilize food items, so that instead of trying to grip a very slippy tomato or something, it just holds it securely so that when you're cutting, it stays stable and firm and doesn't fall away. The teenagers who are going to and from home independently when they're in high school, there are things that if they struggle with keys, which can sometimes be fiddly, again, there's something called a key wing. Just Google that, and it's just something that you add onto a key to make it easier to hold on to. Play and leisure. So like I said before, it's really important that children have the same opportunities to explore leisure and play like their peers, like their siblings. So if we start from the bottom right, there is a CEA card we have just put down there because maybe not everyone knows about it, but if you're receiving DLA, so Disability Living Allowance, often you're entitled to a CEA card, which gives you one-for-one tickets when you go to the cinemas. That might be quite nice for a teenager who wants to go to the cinema now that they're finally open with their friends. The one above that and the one on the left, so these are just examples of just flagging this. I know the CMT kids weekend away, they take the children away and they do all sorts of outdoor activities, and then there are ways to adapt all these things. It's great opportunities for children to be involved in things that perhaps they're not sure that they could be involved in, because if they're struggling in PE, for example, in school, it can get them really down. But then when you've gone outdoors and you're doing canoeing and you're climbing a rock wall, it really helps to boost its self-esteem. Swimming is a really great exercise, and just something that children do really like. A lot of children with CMT who struggle with balance find that once they go into water, they're like a mermaid. And the guy who's pictured in the photo is someone called Jamal Hill. I think he's American. He has CMT, and currently I think he's the top Paralympian swimmer in the States. So that's a huge achievement for him. And also the one above, so some of the children I have on my caseload go horse riding, and that's something that perhaps you've not thought about. And the one on the right is just a child on a little trike. I'm really sorry, cut off the picture at the bottom. It's actually got 3 wheels rather than 2, and that's just, there are all sorts of different bikes and trikes and cycles that you can explore to help your child gain these opportunities. So I want to touch on preparation for adulthood, because children do grow up and become adults. So I just want to put some solutions on there. So some of you may be aware of Ask Sarah. So in the UK, there is this website. If you type in Ask Sarah, that's a sort of a government website where you can go in and it asks you some series of questions of things that you struggle with, and then they give you some solutions and things where you can buy things to help you. So I'm sure I've not covered everything that you struggle with every day on these slides. So there's always things on there that they can prompt and give ideas on. Access to work is a scheme, and that's not just for adults. It also can help so high school teenagers and maybe those in college who want to do work experience and need a bit of extra support to be able to do work experience. So perhaps the transport to get to their workplace if they struggle to get the bus, or if they need a more accessible working environment ergonomically, or if they need a laptop, or things like that that can be funded through, again, these are government schemes. I've put pictures of some driving adaptations as well, because children are going to grow up and eventually learn to drive, and we know children who are on a DLA higher rate are eligible to start learning driving a year earlier than their peers. And there are lots of things that can be explored, and so it's really important that children with CMT start getting their license early, so it gives that additional independence. And obviously relationships, and we know that teenagers and young people want to have relationships and with like everyone else, and that's something that if we can encourage their independence as much as possible, they have the opportunity to have the same peers opportunities as their peers. So another thing that I've not covered up till now is some examples is to talk about splinting. So a lot of the splints that you get on the feet are issued by orthotics and physios who look into those. OTs tend to look maybe a little bit more at the hands. At the moment, not a lot of children on my caseload use hand splints, and I would always recommend that you speak to your OT who knows your child and their hands and can do a proper assessment before you use any splints, because if you don't need a splint, sometimes using a splint can be more harmful than giving you the benefits. But just so that you're aware, there are different types of splints out there. There are splints that people wear, for example, that helps to stretch, promote some stretching and for resting. But also there are lots of splints that can be worn to help someone to be able to use their hands better. So for example, you can see on the top left and the bottom left, these are examples of finger sort of handwriting splints and thumb splints that can help support the thumb. We know that in CMT the thumb is often involved, and the ability to have that, it just helps to position that thumb in a more optimal position for doing things with hands. There are also finger splints that are available for those who don't like wearing huge bulky splints, so like the one that that you can see can be used in conjunction with handwriting. But again, don't always speak to an OT before you look into any hand splints. Again, think about what the goal is, what you're aiming to achieve. and then we can think about what kind of splints are helpful for you, for your child. As OTs, we spend a lot of time talking to people about managing their fatigue and energy. I could probably talk a whole hour about this topic. And we know that especially research has been done more in the adult population, that fatigue is a huge, huge issue for adults with CMT. And I think that's really not a surprise when you've looked at the iceberg model. And, you know, we spend, I think it's an ongoing process, but it takes time to to be aware and put into some of the principles around conserving energy. But generally the principles are around planning, prioritizing, pacing and positioning. So, you know, making sure you're in the optimum positions that don't take up all your energy, your pacing, your planning. Put some examples at the top. Again, not prescriptive at all, but just things that people have put in to simplify their lives. So for example, lots of us have an Alexa in our home, and that's something that just makes life easier. Some adaptations are useful. So, you know, some people might choose to sit on a bath board to shower, for example, rather than getting in and out, or rather than standing, because that just conserves your energy a little bit. Having an extra rail on the stairs can help with going upstairs, and with, you know, a good posture when you're going up and down. And sleep is really important. We know that you know, children wearing splints can impact on their sleep, or other factors. You know, teenagers, a lot of their sleep is disrupted as well. They tend to sleep really late and then sleep in the morning. It's really important to develop a good sleep hygiene pattern for your child and for adults as well. And that, you know, there isn't one solution for everyone. So do speak to your OT and talk about what works for you, your family, you know, what's appropriate for their age at that time. And I've got the battery picture on the bottom left because I just want to show an example. Sometimes I've talked to families about, you know, thinking about your energy like a battery. And we know that, you know, if your phone battery goes low and you don't charge it, then it turns off and it takes a long time to recharge again. And people can be a bit like that. And actually, the more we can do to kind of recharge our batteries when they go into amber, to back to green, that's often a better solution than letting it go all the way to red and then having to spend a long time to get up. And then we know that in children, you know, fatigue manifests in many ways. You know, a lot of children have social masking in school, so they do everything like everyone else, and then when they get home, you know, you can see the tantrums, the tears, or, you know, can come out in anger. And, you know, children feel so safe with their parents that they often feel, you know, that's where they express their feelings, and how, you know, after a long tiring day when they've had to be, you know, fitting in like everyone else without, you know, people realizing that all the invisible things that are going on like in the iceberg. A huge thing that as an OT I do is to work with schools, and this is obviously really challenging because it's not just like a one thing that a school needs to do. A lot of it is around awareness. So I know CMTUK, I'm just flagging your resources. So there is the fact sheet, a guide for teachers on the left, and on the right there are some friends and teachers cards that I found really helpful and families have found helpful. So do use them if you're not aware of them already, just to, you know, increase the general awareness and increase the awareness of that CMT iceberg for teachers, to realize that how much the child is going through that they can't see. You know, when children, lots of things are helpful in general. So, you know, things like using a laptop or having extra time for writing, maybe using clicker, dictate options, having a scribe, things like having a lift pass, things like being able to leave early from classes or a front of queue pass, these things. It's really important that children have all the right accommodations before they start a new school. So, you know, just life, they can just settle in and just get to know new friends and experience all the usual challenges like everyone else without the additional things that go on. So where would you seek OT advice? At the moment, in terms of those of you who attend a specialist neuromuscular clinic, so for children's, at the moment, the Evelina, Southampton, Liverpool, Leeds and Preston do have a specialist OT as part of your neuromuscular team, so you can speak to them, but otherwise, always speak to your team, and they can always refer you to your community pediatric OT team, which is available everywhere you live. And there are social services OTs there are lots of different OTs working in different services. So social services OTs look at maybe adaptations or equipment. There are housing OTs who can help to advise on if you're thinking of moving house, if your house isn't appropriate for long term. There are OTs who work in driving assessment centres that can advise on driving adaptations when older children need that, and also primary care. So in some areas there are OTs that work in GP practices, but if you're, perhaps when they're 18 or 19, they're not sure, go to your GP and they can always refer you to the right OT that you need. And so that's me, thank you. And I'm gonna open it up for questions now. I'm gonna stop sharing. I'm gonna have to work out how to do that.
Thank you so much for that, Wendy. We've got a few questions coming in.
Yeah.
On the side there. I don't know if you can see them there, or if you want me to read them out.
If you read them out, it might be better.
Yeah,
but
sure.
I'll have a look at the chat as well.
Michael's saying he has severe sensory loss in his hands, which affects everyday tasks most people take for granted. He's unable to do fasteners, zips, buttons, etc. And his OT doesn't know anything about CMT. How can we educate her?
Yep. So if we kind of in the neuromuscular world, we kind of operate on a sort of a hub and spoke. So we always encourage. So in Manchester, for example, I work really closely with all the OTs in the community. So I look after half of Greater Manchester. So I try and reach out to local OTs because some of them may only have a child with CMT, like one on their caseload, and so I always reach out. But if you speak to your specialist neuromuscular clinic and encourage them to get in touch with your OT to share information about CMT, that often will help.
We got Rob is asking, do you need a GP to refer you to an OT specialist? Or if not, what is the process? So
if your child is already attending a CMT clinic, so in a specialist service, so if there isn't currently an OT there within the specialist neuromuscular clinic, then just speak to them. They know your child very well, and they can do the referral to the community health OTs.
Next question from Amy. Do schools have a duty to put in lifts to make schools accessible?
That's a good question. So schools have a duty to put in reasonable adjustments. I have worked with some schools who have listed buildings and they're not able to attach the lift shaft, for example, to the building because it's a listed building. But I think without knowing all the specifics, I think getting in touch with the local education SEN authority, that's often a first step, and they can then help you and liaise with your school and work out sort of the legalities of what they should provide. Because if a lift is not if a lift is definitely not possible, there are so many other ways that that can be put in place to ensure that a child gets to all their classes. For example, we know that last year when COVID hit, lots of secondary schools just moved all the children into classrooms, static classrooms, and the teachers moved to reduce the volume of people walking in corridors, and that really worked very well for a lot of our children with CMT, not having to move between classes, and the teachers came to them. And so these things are possible. It's about awareness, and often it's about someone just having the will and saying, yes, we're going to do this. I've got a child who with CMT at the moment who's she can do stairs, but they're really a huge struggle, and she does use crutches. And the specialist Spanish class used to be upstairs, but actually they've moved it down to the ground floor. And she said that, wow, it's not just helped her, but it's helped her whole class, because that class is at the end of the day, and actually everyone benefits from not going all the way upstairs for that class when they're all feeling tired anyway. Yeah.
Next question is about GCSEs, choosing GCSEs.
Yeah.
But because Dawes has weak hands, she can't do art or textiles, and she's not sure she can do food tech. Are they able to ask the teacher to help with chopping things, or should they just avoid it?
Yes, definitely. So if hand function is stopping you from chopping things, so then, you know, and you're taking that subject, then you should be entitled to having, you know, children with. I do have children who have an education, health and care plan, and that's part, and they might have a one-to-one who will help to do the things. I've got children who actually who haven't got enough function to even do a lot of the cooking themselves, but they dictate and get their one-to-one to actually do the cooking while they supervise, and they tell them, right, you know, stop, take it off the fire now, and do this, do that. But yes, all that should, you know, children are entitled to having accommodations like that. So things that can be chopped already, that should be considered, or getting extra help. Yes.
Okay.
Actually, so I didn't mention about careers advice. Obviously, I always, when the child starts high school, I do mention that, you know, having good careers advice when they're in, you know, year 10, year 11, you know, even before that, when they're doing options for GCSEs, to really have it's really important to have that meeting and to think about, you know, not to limit your options in any way, but to have a good understanding of what's out there and what their interests are. And, you know, there are some jobs that are probably not as great if you have CMT. I think, you know, thinking about a lifespan perspective, we know from research that adults with CMT have said that some of them have struggled to maintain the work that they were doing when they were younger and have had to change careers, or people have had to just retire early. So actually having that awareness when you're young to have a job that you can do the rest of your life. Although nowadays, you know, people change jobs and careers. But yes, you know, if that's something that if you get in early and just have some, have the right information and choices, that's very important.
Okay, a couple more minutes left, so I'll try and get through these last questions. Where can you look for driving adaptations for cars?
Yep, so if you Google regional driving assessment centres, it should take you to the national sort of list of driving assessment centres across the country in the UK. There are, so like in Manchester, our closest one is in Haydock, for example. I know there's ones down south. There's probably enough. I mean, they're not all like super close to you, but there are enough ones around the country, enough, and on the website there'll be a list of possible adaptations. You know, when you get to the point where you can drive, or perhaps you have been driving a car but you're struggling more with your CMT perhaps as an adult, that's you can get a referral, so you can get your GP to refer you to these centres, or you can do a self-referral as well to the regional driving assessment centres and meet up, and they can give you advice and things.
Okay, and we're right at the end here. Can the hand splints be authorised by an OT, or is this the GP CCG?
Is that a funding question then? Can
the hand splints be authorised by an occupational therapist?
So generally, if you're seeing an OT and they feel that you need a hand splint, then it would be their responsibility to either provide one, so either, you know, something off the shelf, or sometimes they're thermoplastic ones that they mold specifically to the hand. And if their service are not commissioned at the moment, they'll you know, if that's your need, they'll be able to speak to your regional centre again, so speak to your neuromuscular team. So for example, at the moment I've got some areas in Manchester that don't provide hand splints locally, but they can refer into the Manchester team for hand splints. It just depends, but speak to your team and someone will find a solution.
Lovely. Okay. Well, thank you so much, Wendy, for your time today. That's been really helpful, really opened up the subject of occupational therapy. I hope it's helped people. And I'm sure if people have more questions, they can always send them to us at CMT United Kingdom, and we can either pass them on to Wendy or possibly answer them ourselves. Yeah. So thank you. Thanks again, Wendy.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Take care now.